I'm Logan Crawford, and right now on Spotlight, we're speaking with Valerie Saxton, better known as VP Saxton in the literary world. She is a celebrated author who has captivated readers with compelling titles such as Adrift and Second Chances. She's also written the books 1, 2, 3, Count With Me and Rhyme Time. Each book offers a unique blend of storytelling, reflecting her diverse talent and versatility. Today, we are thrilled to dive into the creative mind behind these works. We're delighted to have this very talented author join us here today on Spotlight. We thank the team at Sweet Spire Literature Management for helping us put her in the spotlight today. And we ask viewers like you to support writers like her by subscribing to our channel. Valerie, great to see you today.
Great to see you too, Logan. It's great to get in touch with you. Thank you for that lovely introduction.
Oh, absolutely. And it's befitting your work. It is quite diverse. It is excellent across the board. Let's start first by talking about Adrift. This is one of your more recent books. And
that was my first one, yes.
That was what your first book. Okay.
That was my first book, yes.
Tell us a little bit about Adrift.
Well, Adrift is really about three families who moved into a housing complex together as one kind of thing and became friends instantly. And it's about how their relationship has developed over the years, and they've shared, joys and sorrows together. And then suddenly they're faced with change and they wonder how they're going to cope with it and if they, can actually live through it with humor, kind of thing.
Yeah. Absolutely. Why do you call it Adrift?
Well, for my mind, it was the fact that the three families felt themselves very secure in where they lived, how they lived, and their families. And then this crisis that comes along actually caused them to feel rather disjointed and at sea, you might say. Exactly. So that's where I came up with the name Adrift.
Okay. Now, is Adrift, sometimes your first book is your first love. Is that your favorite book that you've written?
It's very close to that, but I think because I've got different genres, the second one that I wrote was called Second Chances, which is a similar kind of book, but it's more complex. A, because it has got more people in it, and B, because it's got two countries in it, and C, because I think it's a more in-depth story. So I like Adrift because it was my first one. I like Second Chances because it went deeper. And the other two works, which are children's works, I just thoroughly enjoy because I write stuff for children as well, which I, enjoy listening to and enjoy writing as well.
Exactly. It releases another part of your mind, another part of your creativity. Yes. Give us an overview of what Second Chances is about.
Second Chances is about two brothers, essentially, who are quite different in their makeup and their achievements in life. One brother is very successful at his business, and the other brother had a really unpleasant experience with his first marriage, not because of anything he had done, he thought, but because the marriage just didn't work and his wife sort of virtually disappeared. And so it's the story of the two brothers. Will they become reconciled or not? And will they be able to work out the problems that they need in order to live fulfilled lives? And all the goings on around them are to do with their families and friends and so on.
You create very compelling characters, very real characters, very compelling conflicts as well within your stories. Are they based on people you know and they've been exaggerated a little bit or modified? Tell us a little bit about the creative process behind creating the characters and the storylines.
Yeah. I don't know that I'd say they're actually based on people that I know, but they're based on people who I have befriended, but not because they've gone through those kind of circumstances. I actually find when I write that it can be very useful to assign an actor to a role for a person that I'm writing about. And so I've got lots of favourite actors from British television and so on. And I often find that allocating a person to that role helps me with the writing of the character. And they quite often sort of end up writing themselves into the story.
Absolutely. Having a distinct character in mind, how they move, how they talk, how they dress, kind of helps bring the character to life. And having a role model for yourself, such as an actor that you admire, I think is pretty helpful, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
Now, we're talking about movie making and TV series making. Have you thought about any of these stories as a book or a movie, as a movie or a TV series, rather?
I don't like to blow my own trumpet, but yes, I have actually. I think they would make super stories for TV. Not the big screen, I don't think, but I think there'd be lovely stories for just TV watching. They're easy to watch, you know, they're sort of user-friendly, language-friendly, all those kind of things. Yeah, so I think that would be very enjoyable.
Okay, let's say a producer from the BBC comes to you, wants to turn one of your books into a series. Is it Adrift or is it Second Chances? Which would you choose and why?
Oh my goodness, that's a bit tricky. My instinct would probably say go with the first one you did first, Adrift, and then perhaps you get an offer for a second one. But I would understand it if someone wanted to do the second one first because there was a bit more to it. I don't know. So it's a bit of a difficult one to answer that, to be honest.
Exactly. Each have their unique characters, each have their unique story, and each would be a great series, as you mentioned. When did you start writing?
About 5 years ago, probably. I actually am teacher trained. I was working in education for a long time. And then when I retired, I didn't feel able to completely stop doing the things that I was doing. And I wanted to compose a text that would be just for my family. So it's about anecdotes, anecdotes from past experiences and so on that I put together in a book. And once that was completed, I thought maybe I should have a go at a novel. And so I didn't particularly do it to have it published. I just wanted to see if I could do it.
Well, you've done it, and it's wonderful. That's for sure. So tell us what the writing process was like for you when you were writing Adrift. Were you disciplined? Did you get up every morning and write? Did it take you weeks? Did it take you months? What was that like?
I would say that mostly I tend to write in the mornings when my mind is fresher and I get a couple of hours in, and then I find it's good to move away from the work and actually have it going through your mind, because sometimes you think, oh, I might rewrite that bit, or, you know, how about I put this particular segment in there instead of there, and so on. So, yes, I'm quite disciplined in most things I do, but I am also led by, you know, feelings and the spirit of being moved or whatever in what I'm writing as well. So it's a bit twofold.
How long did it take you to write Adrift?
About a year for each book, I'd say.
Yeah. Writing in the morning, I find, is very, very helpful. And I've actually read about the phenomenon is that you're kind of still in a dreamlike state. So your creativity actually kind of flows. Do you find that
that's
same?
An interesting thought. Yeah.
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 Absolutely. It's actually why a lot of writers like to have a little alcohol when they're drinking. I'm not recommending it, but I'm just saying they like to be in like a little bit of a creative, a little bit of a dreamlike state when they're writing. So their characters and their stories come to life. And yours certainly have. Let's talk about some of the children's books you've written. Which was the first children's book you wrote?
I did Rhyme Time first, obviously written in rhyme. I think it's beautiful, actually, working with children and the way they come across and begin to discover language in its own right. And I've always found that my own children and other children that I've had contact with love rhyme. They really enjoy it. They anticipate it. They copy it, you know, and they just completely warm to something that's written in rhyme. And they're funny. They're funny little books and rhymes and stories about, you know, that children would really relate to. And I think there's a real plus in them because the children that are put into the stories and the rhymes and so on are all relating to one another and relating to the world around them. And they're very mixed in their sense of belonging. You know, there's physical abilities, there's mental abilities, there's colour, you know, all those kind of things, all those diversities are included in the books.
Wonderful, wonderful. That anticipation of the next rhyming word that you talk about is really wonderful with children, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Yeah,
absolutely.
They're excited. They're trying to guess what the word is.
Yeah.
And sometimes they come up with it, and it's kind of a thrilling experience for them. So that's wonderful.
Yeah.
So 1, 2, 3, count with me also has a rhyming theme. It sounds like, at least from the title, right?
It does, yes. So it's similar in that sense, and it's a companion book, really, because one is focusing on language and one is focusing on numeracy. But it's similar in the sense there's these little characters that are using numbers in their vocabulary as they go through their day, you know, that kind of thing. So it's similar but different.
Wonderful, wonderful. Tell us a little bit. You mentioned you were trained as a teacher. Did you work as a teacher?
I did work as a teacher for quite some years, yes.
Okay.
I've done a lot of age range. I've worked in kindergarten and pre-primary and then lower school. I also did some music and a little bit of high school, but not very much of that. But I tended to find that I enjoyed every group of children that I have taught, even with different ages, because you find different things to celebrate and different things to get stuck into, you know, according to the age of the children you work with. So I count myself very fortunate to have had such a wide experience within the world of teaching.
Absolutely. It is a wonderful experience. I've worked as a teacher myself, both on the college level and actually with nursery school kids. My mother owned a daycare center. So having children around is wonderful. It actually reminds you of what it's like to be alive and to be creative and all of
and to be lost in something.
Exactly.
You know, yes.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
And you've gotten lost in something. You got lost in your book, writing it for a year. When you were writing Adrift, were you showing it to someone page by page, chapter by chapter?
No.
Did you wait for it to get done? Tell us who your first reader was.
Oh, my first reader actually probably would have been my best friend, actually. I asked her to read it first, and I stood back from it, you know, while she read it, because of, one thing I can't do really is give people bits of it. You know, if you can't see the whole complete thing, then stay away. You know, this is my baby, and you'll read it when I'm ready, kind of thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You almost don't want their input on where the story should go, because that's, like you said, it's your baby. You want to bring it up the right way, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yes. I'll let it go when I'm ready to let it go.
Exactly. Let's talk a little bit about second chances. How do you think it resonates with readers who have faced challenges in their own lives?
I think it really does, because it takes hold, as it were, of the limitations that you have set yourself within the kind of life you're living. And whether you're content or not to just carry on in the same old way, or whether you think it's about time you broke free and either did something for yourself or did something that affected other people in a very meaningful way. And so it's really about mistakes that people have made, putting them right or not putting them right, and taking opportunities as they arise. You know, that takes courage.
Exactly, exactly. And most people's lives are a redemption story. Most people's lives are about second chances. Nobody's life is a trajectory straight up. It's up and down and learning from your mistakes and falling and getting up again. And it's sometimes about third, fourth, fifth chances, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think the writing of maybe particularly Second Chances, but the other book as well, I think they help you to look at your own life in a more subjective way. You know, you can very often get tied up in knots about the mistakes you've made and the things that you've done, and I wish I'd never said this, and I wish I'd always done that, or whatever it might be. But I think when you're writing and you step back and then look at what you've written, I think that can remind you that you're just human. We all are. We all make silly mistakes. We all do dumb things. You know, that's part of living.
Exactly, exactly. And I always find novels in many ways more informative than nonfiction because they're told in an interesting manner. You see yourself perhaps in the characters or in the situations. So there's a lot to a novel. It's not just a fictional story out there. It's about people and the challenges they face and the way they get through their days and their lives, right?
Yeah, it is. Yes, that's right. Very much so.
Which of the books was the most challenging for you to write?
Actually, the most challenging thing is the book that I'm writing currently, because I've decided that I would try and do a sequel to Adrift because lots of people requested it of me. And I have found that far more difficult, actually, leaving a story that you've written and then still retaining the characters, still maintaining the feel of the book, but coming up with something totally different at the same time. That's been very challenging.
Yeah, I know readers might not believe it, but you can write a book and actually forget a lot of the things that are actually within those pages, right?
Yes, that's right. You have to have the book by your side and flip through. And what did I say about this character? You know, how many children did they have? You know, that kind of thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So have you come up with the title? Can you give us a little bit of the storyline for the sequel to Adrift?
Well, believe it or not, very sort of classically, I called it Further Adrift, which probably sounds a bit boring, but anyway, that could change. But I quite like the title Further Adrift, to be honest.
And as far as the storyline goes?
The storyline is, how can I say it without giving it away? Their families have sort of settled back into the way they were living life before, but they've moved on, but they're sort of getting on with life. And then there's a bombshell. I don't want to tell you what the bombshell is, but something completely unexpected happens that throws them all off guard and off scent.
We love twists and unexpected turns like that in a story. I think that's what readers really long for. You know, that's what keeps them interested, that its story takes a sudden twist or a sudden change and the unexpected. And that's what the thrilling part of being a reader. Big part of James Patterson's novels are always having unexpected twists. So it sounds like you got something wonderful in store. We won't push you anymore to find out what it is because we don't want to be a spoiler here. Let's talk about writing children's books. That must be a different process in writing your novels, correct?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yes. I come up with sort of one poem at a time, mostly. And I tend not to leave that poem alone until I've got it. You know, I don't have lots of poems going through my head at the time. I just say, oh, I've got to do a poem about the letter T or whatever it might be, and I'll work on that solidly until it's done. That's not to say I won't ever go back and change things, because sometimes I do. But yeah, I see each one as its own little work of art or work of fiction, you know, in its own right, kind of thing.
Wonderful. Have you had the pleasure of reading your children's books to children?
Absolutely. I always have several copies on hand that I just would give out to people, and they will really enjoy it. And of course, my family love them. I even gave some of the rhyming books out as Christmas presents last Christmas to adults, you know, because, you know, I think, well, you're going to have a child in your house at some time or the other, even if you haven't got one now. So, you know, I think that it's good for the work to be out there.
Exactly. You know? And the illustrations in your children's books, tell us about those.
I can't claim that I drew the pictures. I do like drawing, actually, but I didn't do that at all. But I did explain exactly what I wanted to have in each picture. And as I said to you before, I like inclusivity in the text that I'm doing. So, you know, that they need to be read by all sorts of children in all sorts of circumstances and in all senses of how you live your life, that kind of thing.
Absolutely. Are there any authors that influence your writing style or storytelling?
When I grew up in a small village in England, you can take the girl out of England, but you can't take England out of the girl. That's what they say, isn't it? When I lived in the village that I first lived in, well, I think I was 4 when I went there. At first, there was a library shelf in the common room of the place that was used for all sorts of things, scout troop and goodness knows what else. There was one shelf that had children's books in it that you could borrow. And then eventually our shire built a magnificent library that was actually full of books, and it was like a treasure trove for me, And I can remember loving the sense of language that Dickens has, and the sense of intrigue that Daphne du Maurier has, and Jane Austen and her sense of romance, and all those, all very different kinds of things that I really loved reading from quite a young age, really. Yeah.
Yeah. You started writing, you said, about 5 years ago. Was it just a matter of having the time to do it? Is that what kept you?
Yes, there was more time. I wanted something to use my brain. And to be honest, once I'd started, I just couldn't stop. I had to get the story done all the way through. So, yeah. I don't quite know what the motivation was. I just wanted to do it, really.
Yeah. And the very first book you said was actually a collection of anecdotes and kind of a memoir.
Yes, that's right.
Tell us about that. Did you ever get it published, or?
I published the copies myself. I only wanted, say, 20 copies because I gave it out to my family because nobody else would be interested in it, really.
Gotcha.
But that's what got me started, because I thought, I've had a go at that, so I'll have a go at a whole novel and we'll see, what happens. And as it happened, it was a good move.
Yeah, absolutely. Got those creative juices flowing. Do you write every day now, more or less?
More or less. It was unusual. It would be unusual for me not to write something or the other. Yes.
What advice would you give to an aspiring author about finding their voice, about shaping their story, about building their characters?
That's a bit tricky because I think it's very different for different people. I like to have my characters in mind before I start writing their dialogues and so on. And as I said to you before, very often the work I find takes care of it, starts its own rolling sort of rhythm of its own going on. Some people like to have a whole plot worked out. I don't do that. I let my plots develop as they move along. So I'd say just start writing. If you want to write, just start writing. You don't have to publish it if you don't want to. You don't have to let anyone else read it if you don't want to. But if that's what you want to do, just give it a go and see how you run with it.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the advice I always give to writers. I'm like, don't think, just write. Whatever you have coming into your brain, put it down on the paper, kind of like a stream of consciousness type of thing.
Yes.
And you can always go back and re-edit it and refine it and make it better later. But to try to edit as you go along is kind of problematic, don't you think?
Yes. Yes, I think it is. I think you need to sort of get it out. To an extent, I mean, it has to make sense for me, what I'm writing, and it has to be cohesive, but definitely you can go through the whole thing, get the story down, and then revisit, for the sake of all those idealistic kind of bits and pieces that you need to, make it a whole work.
Exactly. You mentioned your best friend was your first reader on Adrift. What was his or her reaction when they read it?
That's a good book. And I had one friend who phoned me up at about 10 o'clock at night and said, I've just finished reading your book. I did it all in one day. And I've never done that before. So, yeah.
That's amazing.
And people would say, that book's really funny. You know, as if that was a surprise. I am actually a very funny person, but that was a surprise. And I've spoken to publishers and so on who said to me, I'm really surprised because when you talk on the phone, you sound so serious, but you
Right.
can't be because your books are funny. And I think it's because I don't really like talking on telephones, to be honest.
Right, exactly. And
Yeah,
all
but
of
I
us have
love to write.
different faces. You know, at times we're
Yeah,
extremely businesslike and serious. At other
yes,
times
that's
we're
right.
clowns, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes. But I do love humour. I love writing humour, reading humour, and just thinking humour up. You know, I really
And
enjoy that.
having humor within the pages of a story, no matter how serious the topic is, makes it more entertaining and makes it more readable.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You
Yeah.
mentioned you were struggling a little bit with the sequel to Adrift. How long have you been working on it so far?
Almost a year, and I'm only about 2/3 through. So this has been the slowest one that I've written so far.
Yeah. Now, as you write Adrift, are other stories percolating in your mind for other novels?
Not so much for novels, but I've regained my interest in poetry for adults as well as for children. That's a different sort of discipline and a different sort of use of your brain, you know. So some environmental stuff and some spiritual stuff and so on. Yeah.
Exactly. Tell us a little bit about your life in Australia. Are you retired from teaching? Do you travel much through the country or the world? Tell us a little bit about your life.
I've retired from, I think you can tell from the image, I've definitely retired from teaching. But I taught for quite some years, as I said before. But I think Australia is a wonderful place to live. And I think Perth is one of the best places of the best to live. It's safe, it's warm, it's pleasant, it's pleasing. But, you know, all over the world, there are pockets of good and bad. You just get that, don't you?
Exactly.
So I love my family to absolute bits. I wouldn't want to be without my family ever. They're wonderful. And I just enjoy life. I did used to travel a fair bit. I don't quite so much now because my health isn't so good, but I have travelled a fair bit. But I enjoy coming back home. When I come in when I'm flying and I come in back over Perth, I always think to myself, no, this is the place for me. Despite missing the history and the heritage that you get in places like London, which is great,
Yeah.
this is a place to live for me.
That's wonderful. Well, I haven't made it to Australia yet. It's on the bucket list. It's a long flight. It's a long flight
It
from
is a
New
long
York.
flight. And don't you think flying is such an odd way to travel when you think about it? You're in such close confines with people that you don't know, and
Yeah,
doing sort of very personal things like eating. You know, I find it
exactly.
really quite bizarre, really.
Exactly. It is. It's a strange environment. You're breathing other people's air. It's close confines. I'm 6'6", so I don't even fit on an airplane,
No,
let
no, that's
alone
right.
thinking about taking an airplane all the way to Australia. So I'm going to have to really, maybe I'll have to break up the trip into a couple of
Yeah,
stops. I don't
that would
know.
be a good idea.
Absolutely. Was writing a refuge for you during lockdown? I think you had a pretty strict lockdown during COVID there in Australia.
Actually, we had one of the best in Western Australia. We had a very decisive government at the time, and they were very strict initially and sort of banned travel virtually and, you know, meeting each other. But it paid off because eventually we got rid of it a lot quicker than, well, not that you're totally rid of it, but we're able to resume normal living much sooner than most people were, to be honest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you write during that time?
Did I?
Were you busy writing during that time? Because everybody, I was busy reading. I did a lot of reading during lockdown.
Yeah.
There
I did a
wasn't
lot of
much to
reading
do
too and
other than
writing
take
too.
walks or something, you know?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So make the most of it.
So that was a pretty busy time for you all for writing?
Yes, it was, yeah. Because you know, I missed going out and I missed my friends and I missed my family. We just couldn't get together in the same way. So there had to be something that took its place. Yes.
Exactly. Now, tell me a little bit about the adult poetry that you're working on. Are you putting it down on paper, I presume? Is this something you're compiling for a book?
Yes. Yes, I am putting it down on paper gradually. I did quite a bit of poetry writing for children, for older children when I was working. I mean, like I might have needed a poem about diet or, you know, whatever it might be. So I did quite a varied amount of that. But I did also do particularly environmental poems that were meant for adults, but they got taken up by children in class too sometimes. I've had one poem, quite long poem about conservation published for the National Library, which was quite some kind of plus. I was very pleased with that. Yes.
Yeah, that's a great recognition of your work, sure.
Yes.
Absolutely.
But yeah, that kind of poetry is totally different, but enjoyable nonetheless.
Now, this kind of poetry is also going to focus on nature, though, correct? Is that what you said?
On the environment, not necessarily, but the environment plays quite a big part in its writing. But family issues as well, learning to accept yourself, you know.
No, I think I read
moving on in life, those kind of things. Yes, sorry.
Yeah, no, I was saying I would think I read somewhere that your books can be personalized. Did you say that?
Ah, yes.
Tell us about that.
The children's books. I thought it's wonderful to give a child a book that they enjoy, but it's even more wonderful if they can claim it to be their own, to make it their own. So in the rhyme book, there is a space at the back of the book for children to insert their own name into one or two of the poems to make it into a book that's their own. And in the 1, 2, 3 count with me, I've got a certificate of merit which children can earn by, you know, being able to repeat their numbers or whatever it might be. Yeah.
That's great. Well, obviously you're interested in education. You've written 2 books that not only entertain children, but they educate children and inform them as well. What is, as a former teacher, as a retired teacher, as an educator, as a writer, what's your take on the state of reading and writing in the year 2023 with our young people in Australia and beyond?
That's a loaded question. I actually have been thinking about that, funnily enough, quite recently, because I tend to have quite a lot of difficulty with digital behaviours, you know, for want of a better word. I really struggle with that. But I was actually thinking the digital age has sort of brought in a fresh idea of communication that people didn't have when they were unable to write or read. You know, when people, it was only the rich who could really read and write, and everybody else had to make do without it. And I think every kind of literature, whether it's yours that you're writing or another's literature that you're reading, has its value. You know, you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. You use it to your advantage. And I think, you know, as long as children are reading books as well, it doesn't matter if they're also using digital forms or, you know, whatever it might be. It's all writing.
Yeah, it's kind of the best of times and the worst of times.
And the worst of times.
To paraphrase Dickens, one of your favorites. It's a time where kids are spending a lot of time on screens like this. Now, this could be more books than an entire library. This contains almost every book ever printed, which is wonderful. But it seems like a lot of the children are more captivated by videos. So a lot of it is visual now, and visual is easier. I know if I'm looking at instructions on how to build some IKEA furniture, I'd rather look at a video how to do it than to read the instructions. So I think it's changing our brains a little bit where we're becoming more visual and less reading. Do you think so also?
I think there's a danger of that, but I do think also that nobody really tires of being able to pick up a book and look at the front cover and flick through the pages and all those kind of things. It's a pleasure that you just don't get with the visual. So
Exactly.
I think I'm hoping that there's always a place for books, and beautiful books, as well as informative books. I actually find it a lot easier still now to actually have a set of written instructions rather than fiddle about with your screen. Now where was that? Where was number 2? That's
Exactly.
difficult. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, our brains, I think, are wired a little differently nowadays because of the digital age. And I think actually in like fMMRs, they can see that there's changes in our brains, for good or bad. I don't want to sound like an old guy. It's the way we grew up was better, So
In my day, yes.
In my day, exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
All of your books are available on Amazon and all the major book sites as well. That's where folks can order them or download them, correct?
Yes, that's right, yes.
Wonderful, wonderful. The names of the books, once again, are Adrift, Second Chances, and then there's a couple of children's titles as well. 1, 2, 3, Count With Me, and Rhyme Time.
Rhyme Time.
They're
yes.
written by Valerie SAXTON. She is known online in the literary world as VP Saxton, and she is quite an author, and she has written quite a number of books in her 5-year career as an author. And I think it's going to be quite prolific as she goes along. Before we leave you today, Valerie, anything you'd like to tell the folks at home?
Apart from thank you for this great interview, which has surprised me completely. Thank you for that. And I'd just like to say, keep enjoying writing, keep enjoying reading, and share it with the world.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for your time today and joining us here on Spotlight. My pleasure.
Thank you.
My pleasure. And to the folks at home, I'm Logan Crawford, thanking you for your time this time. Until next time on Spotlight.